In recent years, there's been a tremendous flurry of interest in perennials in American gardens, partly coming from a rediscovery of Gertrude Jekyll and her writings in England, and also partly a movement from the huge contemporary German perennials world coming into America at this point. And deservedly so, because these perennials come in a wide variety of colors, sizes, forms, seasons of bloom, and they are small enough that gardeners can collect and plant many different kinds, and you can design and create about as flexible and diverse a garden as you can possibly want to do. The perennials that are popular and widely grown that sort of become the standard cliches, like daylilies and iris and hostas, some of the grasses, the rudbeckias and so forth, tend to be plants that have sort of two things going for them. One, they have been popularized often in British books and British writing as we look at their beautiful borders there. And then also a fact that they're easy to propagate, fast growing, they're inexpensive and almost foolproof. But there are some really wonderful garden perennials that are less known, and in many cases these are native plants to North Carolina or to the Americas that certainly deserve much greater use in our gardens in this country. And today I want to focus on one specific group or one genus of plants that is one of my favorites that I really feel needs great expansion and use in this country in our gardens. And partly we don't see them because the British haven't discovered them. They're American plants and they haven't used them that much, so they haven't led the way for us. So we need to rediscover our own plants. This blue-flowered plant that you're looking at here looks very much like a lupin or a bluebonnet. In reality, it is in a genus called Baptisia, or sometimes called the false indigos. And the one that you're looking at, this blue one, is probably the most widely known and the most common of the ones that are grown in the garden industry. There are herbaceous perennials, which means that they die to the ground each year and then they come up again in the spring. And in North Carolina, depending on where you are from the coast to the mountains, you'll see this bloom in the time period of probably early April into late May as you go further toward the mountains. They normally are seen in the range of about 2 to 3 feet in height, and they are native plants here in the eastern United States. In fact, all of the Baptisias are native to the America. Now, in terms of culture, once you have the plant, they're almost the ideal garden perennial because they'll take virtually any kind of soil, almost any moisture level. They have almost no pests at all. They're essentially problem-free. In terms of propagation and handling, they are grown from seed that are collected and usually either soaked or filed a little bit to break the hard seed coat and then germinated and grown. They can also be propagated by cuttings by nurserymen under mist to keep a high humidity, or if you have a large older clump, they can be propagated by dividing, digging them in the wintertime when they're dormant, cutting the clumps into multiple pieces and then replanting. You'll find when you try to dig these, they have a massive root system, and so it is a fair job to go through that kind of a process. And part of the reason then that we don't see them so much commercially is that they're not the easiest on a widespread scale of doing divisions and cuttings like most of the perennials are. And they tend to not be showy the first year after propagation. They're fairly small, and when you get a quart or a gallon can, you may have 1 or 2 stems and that's about it. But they're a lot like peonies that are such a popular item in gardens in cooler areas of our country, in that each year they get bigger and bigger and better and better. And this is a perennial that can be beautiful in your garden for 25 years or more and never need dividing, and simply gets better and more magnificent every year as you go along. Now, as we indicated, the blue one, the Baptisia australis, is the most common, but there are probably 6 to 8 other species that are available through specialists by hunting, and we'd like to at least look and talk about some of these that are possible as well. Now, this spectacular plant, this white flowered one, is called Baptisia pendula. And one would look at it and look at the plant and wonder why the name pendulous comes, because there really isn't anything pendulous about it as you see at this point. But botanically the name comes in that when the flowers finish blooming and they begin to produce seed pods, the seed pod hangs down in a pendulous fashion, and that is where the name comes. There is a virtually identical species, and both of these are native in North Carolina, that's pure white like this, called alba, which is an obvious name, and on it the seed pods hang upright, so that's really the only two difference in these plants. But this is an even larger and perhaps more spectacular plant than the blue one, and I think they look very nice planted together indeed in the landscape. Again, I have seen plants of Baptisia pendula that are up to 6 feet in diameter, 4 to 5 feet in height, with perhaps 300 to 400 bloom stalks that are up to 2 feet in length. So it does become truly a spectacular perennial for the garden. So again, these are lesser known. You can find seed of them in seed catalogs and plants through plant specialists. So they're worth your effort to try to find because they are easy, durable, and will last forever. In addition to the ones that I've walked by here, we also have in our collection types that have a creamy yellow flower. There is another one, Baptisia tinctoria, that has a bright chrome yellow flower that's quite a delight. And I particularly like it as a sort of substitute for a plant called Thermopsis, which has much the same color of flowers, but Baptisias stand upright. They tend to not fall over, whereas often in our gardens the Thermopsis tend to do that. So the Baptisia tinctoria is a nice guideline there. There are miniature types that will be less than a foot high. They're creamy colored and deep purple. So it's a fun group of plants to experiment with. And if you want to try something different, something essentially guaranteed and dependable in your garden, take a look at the Baptisias and see what you can do with the false indigos.